The first subject that we need to tackle is the Fusion 360 user interface. The user interface is this entire window that you can see right here. So that's going to include the data panel, which is this gray box on the left, as well as any part, file, or assembly file that you have, which is this big window on the right. So the first thing you're going to do is, if you haven't created one yet, you're going to create a new project. You're going to click on the new project button, name it whatever you want. Um, After that, you create it, and then you'll double click into the project file, which I just have this one called CAD Basics. We're going to double click in there, very important. At that point, we can go ahead and click on this X right here and just close that out so we've got a little bit more space to work with from right here. This is where you're going to spend the majority of your time doing anything. So this is where you create parts. This is where you put assemblies together, import parts, different things along those lines. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the most important thing of all of Fusion related stuff, which is this little button right here, the save button. Yes, I'm sure we've all had a point in time where we haven't saved something and it sucks. And so we just need to make sure that we're very, very familiar with that and make that muscle memory common practice whenever you're making changes or doing anything. So even when you created a file and there's absolutely nothing there, you can go ahead and save it. It's just going to ask you to name it. We're just going to call this part one, and then it's going to give you a location. So currently, if you put down the drop menu, you can choose location out of your projects. I'm going to go to the CAD project. Later on, this will have folders that you can put things in to help you organize your parts and your assemblies and different stuff. But right now, we don't have any folders, so we're just going to go ahead and just save it right in there. And so you're going to notice this gray little check mark that appears and the fact that the save button is no longer able to be pressed. And you can open up your data panel with this little 9 square grid right there. And as you can see, the part one file is now there. There's a little white spot right here for a smaller version of the part that you'll be able to see, but we haven't created anything, so there's nothing there yet. Now let's talk a little bit more about everything else you're seeing. So you've got your view cube right here. The view cube allows you to change the orientation of the camera relative to whatever the part of the assembly is. It's basically just if you were looking at an object and then you moved around it, or underneath it, or above it. The view cube is labeled, as you can see. The home position will always be on top on front, top on the top, front on the left, and right on the right. Crazy. It's also going to include the X, Y, and Z axis according to that. You can change the orientation of these things, but it doesn't really matter right now. We may talk about that later. At the top, you've got your ribbon, your tool ribbon, which is going to include a bunch of these different things, all the ones that you can see, which are easily accessible, in addition to all these drop-down menus that have even more features. So all those things we'll get into later. You also have different tool ribbons to access. So you've got one for just normal solids, one for surfaces, meshes, sheet metal things, whether when you're creating bends and things along those lines, plastics that you can have different properties than metals in different parts, so you can adjust those, utilities and manage, which we will get in those far, far into the future. You also have this drop-down menu right here, which you have 7 different options. We'll also get into those in the future. All you really need to know is the design is the basic one. Rendering is for making your thing look realistic as it says to you. Animation is if you have moving parts and you want to show those off or make sure to see those work. Simulation, you've included physics and you can see where things are being bent or things under compression or tension. Manufacture is if you want to use this program to create instructions for CNC machinery. And the final thing is drawings, which you're just going to be able to take your design and make drawings out of it that you might want to send to companies or you might want to have printed out for whatever reason it may be. Over on the left here, you've got your browser. The browser is going to include a lot of different things. It's going to include all the parts or different things that you import if you're doing an assembly. It's going to include all of the joints and constraints that you have if you're doing an assembly. It's also just going to include all of the extrusions that you do, all of the different edits that you actually physically create into this space. This bottom little bar right here is an additional way to change how you're viewing the part or assembly that you're creating. We have the view cube right here, but we also have the ability to pan. You have zoom in and zoom out. You can just change your display settings. You can include grids. You can add multiple viewports. You can orbit around objects. Lots of different things, all very good. Comments are included here. It's helpful to maybe add just a little bit of comment to tell whoever is working on this, if you're working on a team, to just tell them what the part is, why it exists, maybe where it's supposed to go, maybe what it is made out of, or if it needs to be 3D printed or manufactured in some way, associated, where to find associated files. At the very bottom, you've got this bar. Currently, it's nothing in it because, again, we haven't created anything yet, but it's going to include a chronological list of all the steps that you take, whether that's creating a sketch, making an extrusion, importing a part, constraining things together, creating a plane. Every single step that you will take, it's going to include that in a chronological order. So it's eventually going to be full of a bunch of different things if you're going to be making a larger assembly. That is, for the most part, all of the user interface of Fusion 360. You've got a few administrative things up here in terms of extensions and a timeline of a history of the things that have happened. Over here, you have a little bit of a many different options from this drop-down menu of creating new designs, new drawings, exporting the design that you have, all those different things. And then, of course, you have your show data panel, which is right here. That's going to cover all of it for this video. And yeah,